If you're watching this video, I feel this deep need to congratulate you, because by now you have learned an enormous amount of economics. You have understood and mastered in Unit 1 what is the basic logic of the set of optimization problems that are used in economics to characterize all sorts of behavior by either consumers or firms. You have learned and mastered how to set up and solve simple models of the consumer and how they make decisions in all sorts of circumstances, and how to characterize the demand function of consumers. In this unit, you have learned to do the same thing for firms and how to characterize the supply function. Why is this so important? Because starting in the next unit, a few days from now, we're going to put everything together. Now we have all of the tools to carry out a systematic attack of how markets behave, what kinds of outcomes they generate, both in terms of making predictions and in terms of the well-being that they generate in many different types of markets, when they are competitive, when they are imperfectly competitive, when there is asymmetric information, and when there are public goods and externalities. And the tools that you have learned are going to pay off enormous returns. So we are about to put everything together, and now you finally have all the weaponry that you need to carry out this ambitious plan of study. As always, I want to take the time in this summary section to highlight some key ideas and results that is important that you keep in mind in your mnemonic loading or coding of the course. And the first set of ideas are about cost minimization and the optimal choice of input. So remember that we define the cost function for a quantity Q at input prices W at R as the minimum cost of producing the level Q. So that's why we have this constraint, such that F is equal to F of K of L. You have to remember that that is the definition of the consumer problem. The solution are going to be K min, that depend on Q and WR, and L min, that depend on Q and WR, that satisfy two key equations. First, the constraint Q is equal to F of K min L min, and second, the ratio of the marginal product of capital by the marginal product of labor, evaluated at K min L min, in both cases, has to be equal to R divided by W. Next, I want to highlight some results about the supply function, but for the case of decreasing returns to scale, semi-decreasing returns to scale, etc., which I think are the empirical relevant ones. Remember that the profit at price P, and we're going to also, by the way, look at, I'm just going to highlight here the case of free trade. The profit at price P is equal to the maximum, the solution to this problem, Q greater or equal than 0, of PQ minus C of Q, whatever the cost function happened to be given the input prices. And in general, for the general case, the supply function is going to have this form: 0 if P is less or equal than the minimum of the average total cost, but taking only into account the semi-fixed cost, and otherwise Q such that P is equal to the marginal cost of Q, and P is greater than the average total cost or equal of Q, of producing Q, again taking into account only the SFCs. And this is in the other case if P is greater or equal than minimum of the ATC SFC. It's useful to keep this general formulation in mind, and keep in mind that in some cases this part doesn't arise when there are no semi-fixed costs. This will allow you to solve problems very quickly. Now I want to highlight one thing here, which is one very common mistake, so warning. One very common mistake is to just apply the equation price equal marginal cost naively and blindly without worrying about the shutdown condition that was behind this. So remember this, we generated this through the shutdown condition. So when you face problems of deriving the optimal firm supply, whether in free trade or not, you have to be very careful about the shutdown condition. That's a very common source of mistake for students doing problem sets and solving models. Finally, just to remind you, what is the general notion of producer surplus, which is the producer surplus at any situation theta is going to be equal to the profits at theta minus the profits at another no trade situation. And we saw that the fixed costs cancel in both cases, so we can write this in general as the revenue that is generated at theta minus the SFC, the semi-fixed cost, plus whatever variable costs are implied in production at theta. So these are the variable costs of production at theta, at situation theta. That general formula will always give you the right answer. And notice, for example, that if there are taxes, you can put them in the cost, but you can also put them as an effect on your revenue.